Dinosaur footprints encased in stone are a stark reminder that fearsome reptiles once roamed the mountains and canyonlands of the United States. Most geologists agree that that was at least 65 million years ago, long before humans evolved. But the Bible tells a different story. The Genesis account of origins claims dinosaurs were created along with humans, and the book of Job describes the fire-breathing Leviathan and Behemoth, a dinosaur that existed only a few thousand years ago. Experts say it's impossible. Dinosaurs only come alive in Hollywood. Until recently, experts were convinced that the fossil record formed gradually over millions of years. But increasing evidence is challenging theories of gradualism and causing Earth history to be rewritten. In Australia, one geologist who disagrees with the conventional model is Dr. Andrew Snelling, with the Creation Science Foundation in Brisbane and Answers in Genesis in Kentucky. At school, children learn that fossils are the record of millions of years of evolutionary change. But as a creationist, Andrew Snelling questions the uniformitarian precepts on which the science of geology is based. He believes that most fossils were formed by a global flood and subsequent local catastrophes.
We can start with looking at a fish, for example. A fish doesn't die and sink to the bottom of a lake or a river or the ocean. It's either eaten by scavengers or rots. The only way you're going to preserve a fish and fossilise it is to bury it alive. The only way you will bury them if you have a catastrophe, something that suddenly covers them up. And when you look in the fossil record, you can see abundant evidence of thousands upon thousands of fish in beautifully preserved detail.
Dr. Ken Carpenter, head of the fossil lab at Denver Natural History Museum, disagrees. He believes most fossils formed gradually millions of years ago.
Fish scales and whatnot can be easily preserved. I know people have used the argument, well, when a fish dies, it floats to the surface. Sure, that's what we see with our goldfish. But that's not true of all fish. There are some fish which don't float, that when you kill them, you will actually find them sinking. So it's very easy to imagine a fish sinking into an environment where oxygen levels are very low. Certainly, we can measure oxygen levels in the bottom of the sea in the basins off the coast of California, where because there's so much organic material that settles in, the bottom waters that are trapped in a basin are very stagnant, and so decay is practically non-existent. Nevertheless, there still is clay and other particulate matter that falls to the seafloor, and any fish that's laying down there is going to get buried. That does not have to be instantaneous. That can appear over spans of tens of thousands of years.
When we look in the fossil record and see beautifully preserved fish like this one here, you can see that the tail and some of the scales and the fins down here and up here, the mouth. Some of the fish that we find in the fossil record, you can actually see the eye sockets, and everything's perfectly intact. Examples, for example, of an ichthyosaur fossilised in the process of giving birth to its baby. These sorts of things weren't slow and gradual. Creatures 2 metres long, buried as if they were snap frozen. And when you see that theme repeated over and over and over again, from rock layer to rock layer to rock layer, it has to indicate that not only the fossils themselves, but the rock layers themselves were catastrophically deposited.
At the Natural History Museum in Denver, fossilized dinosaur bones are being prepared for exhibition. Although experts at the museum recognize that there may have been local catastrophic events, they hold to an evolutionary scheme and do not agree that the fossil record was laid down by any major catastrophe in recent history.
Museums portray themselves as being objective. They make a lot of assumptions and they mix a few facts, but they present the whole package as a set of facts. Most scientists assume evolution is true. They assume long ages for the Earth. So their assumptions determine their
Bill
conclusions.
Jack, a creationist, leads his own unofficial tours of Denver's Natural History Museum, where he challenges the museum's evolutionary assumptions.
So they date the fossil by the layer of rock in which they find it. How do they date the layer of rock? By certain index fossils they find in the rock. So they date the layer by the fossil and the fossil by the layer, and the layer by the fossil and the fossil by the layer. What kind of reasoning is that? It's called circular reasoning.
The question on how the whole business of whether or not geologists really engage in circular reasoning about the age of the Earth, the fossil is decided as being such and such million years old. It's found in these strata, therefore these strata are such and such million years old, and you get this whole circular argument. But relative dating cannot stand all just by itself to determine, say, 140 million years ago that the Diplodocus lived. We know the 140 million year old because we can find volcanic ash in the strata, and it's the dating of that ash.
One of the key evidences that many people use to give an old age for the Earth is the radioactive disintegration in the rocks of various elements. You can then calculate from that an age, but you make assumptions when you do so. You have to assume that you know what conditions were like at the beginning. You've got to know that nothing has changed through time, through all those millions of years. You haven't had extra radioactive particles added in or some of the radioactive particles extracted. And then thirdly, you've got to assume that the clock has ticked away at the same rate all the time. And because of those assumptions, you can't always be absolutely sure that your clock is reliable.
Until recently, most people believed that the Earth is young. But in the last century, Charles Darwin developed his theory of gradual biological evolution, and Charles Lyell popularized the idea that over millions of years, gradual processes slowly shaped the face of the Earth.
Uniformitarianism is a belief that basically the present is the key to the past. It's a belief in the uniformity of natural processes. In other words, we can explain what happened in the past based on what we see occurring in the present. And that's a good reason why it's so caught on so much in geology, because it's something you can study in the present and extrapolate it back into the past. And I think that's the main reason why it's such a prevalent view that underpins all of modern geology. You don't need to put God into the equation. You can just simply look at the rocks, look at the present processes in the world, and endeavour to use those with your powers of observation and rational thinking.
But the idea of millions of years of uninterrupted gradual change is now being challenged by many scientists. Astrogeologist Dr. Eugene Shoemaker at the Lowell Observatory was one of the team that discovered the Shoemaker-Levy comet. He disagrees with the creationist time scale, but his research on impact theories shows that dramatic, catastrophic events have shaped the face of the Earth.
The view that we have of the role of large impacts today actually challenges the old paradigm of uniformitarianism right to its roots. Indeed, the notion that comets might hit the Earth and produce catastrophic changes is an old one. It goes all the way back to Edmund Halley in the 17th century. And it was part of the background of the debate that occurred in the 19th century between the advocates of catastrophism on one hand and uniformitarianism on the other. It turns out in the 19th century, the uniformitarians won the debate at that time. But in fact, they were wrong, or at least partly wrong, and the catastrophists were partly right. So we really have to reassess this whole idea of uniformitarianism, which has been taken now for several generations to be an underlying principle of geology. It just simply isn't right.
Gradualism, is still the foundation of modern geology. But mounting evidence of catastrophism is causing geologists to revise the conventional theories. Creation scientists believe that the greatest catastrophic event in Earth history was a recent global flood that destroyed almost all life and shattered the continents. Their claims are supported by studies of local catastrophic events that can be observed today.
We do know of catastrophes that occur today, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, those sorts of things. And we can certainly, in a sense, apply the same principle, the present is the key to the past, and we can actually look at rock units and geological processes that are catastrophic in the present, and we can actually see those features in the rock record. And that gives us a clue that maybe the past wasn't all that quiet, and when you've got fossil upon fossil upon fossil that show evidence of catastrophism, it begins to give you a different picture of the total geological record as somehow not being a slow and gradual thing. It points to a catastrophic past in the Earth's history.
Under the fragile crust, Yellowstone National Park in the northern Rockies is a seething cauldron of geothermal activity. Sometime in the past, powerful volcanic explosions blasted through 1,000 square miles of rock, hurtling debris as far east as Kansas. At Yellowstone, several layers of petrified trees are found standing upright. How did extensive forests become fossilized? It's widely claimed that the trees were gradually fossilized where they grew millions of years ago. But a new theory developed by Dr. Stephen Austin at the Institute for Creation Research in San Diego suggests the trees may have been uprooted in a sudden catastrophe, swept away and rapidly buried. The creationist model was seen in action during the eruption of Mount St. Helens volcano in 1980, when thousands of trees were swept from the hillsides and deposited in Spirit Lake.
One of the things that most puzzles me about the conventional way of thinking about the Earth is fossil deposits. The fossil forests here at Yellowstone are distinct layers. We find petrified wood. Do those represent 27 distinct fossil forests which flourished millions of years ago? The signs at Yellowstone here used to say that. They used to say that there were countless tens of thousands of years involved with each of the forest layers, and that the whole rock strata sequence took 40 million years to form. But as we look at those fossil deposits, we see that they're similar to some of the things that happened at Mount St. Helens volcano. A whole series of upright logs were deposited at Mount St. Helens in the bottom of a lake. And the mud flows at Mount St. Helens made stratified deposits with upright logs embedded in the deposits. And each of these may look like it was a separate forest over many, many thousands of years, but this process of redepositing logs creates what, in our ordinary experience, looks like would require millions of years. The modern thinking about this may indicate that catastrophic processes are better at making fossil wood deposits and even upright logs embedded in the rock strata than the slow and gradual processes are.
Stephen Austin's studies of the floating log mat also suggest that the process of coal formation may be better explained by the creationist model.
We normally think that coal forms in swamps as plant material builds up and builds that thick, spongy layer of peat. But what do we actually observe in modern swamps? We haven't found coal forming in modern swamps. On the bottom of Spirit Lake, next to Mount St. Helens, a large mass of broken plant material was deposited rapidly, not slowly like in a swamp over thousands of years, but it formed rapidly in a matter of months in the bottom of the lake from logs. Logs were floating on the lake, the bark was rubbed off and fell to the bottom of the lake, and we accumulated a peat layer rapidly. And I went diving underneath a floating log mat and saw the evidence that peat can accumulate rapidly. And we know in the laboratory studies that once plant material is buried, it takes just a moderate pressure and a little bit of heat to convert it to coal. The actual conditions are fairly well described by experiments. At 150 degrees centigrade with pressure, you can convert plant material to coal rapidly. And it happens in just a matter of weeks. It doesn't take millions of years. So I think catastrophist views on the origin of coal are strongly favored by what we see in the Earth.
Extensive fossil-bearing sedimentary rocks were laid down gradually over millions of years, according to traditional theories. The Grand Canyon is cut through sedimentary rock, and it's often seen as a slice through time.
It is thought, just in the period of time represented in this hand specimen, that consists of probably 100 to 200 different layers of various mud and very fine sand layers, that each one of these little cycles is likely to represent deposition within a period of, let us say, 6 months or a year, so that we can be fairly sure that there could be hundreds of years deposited in this 4-inch thickness of rock. If we then were to walk down into the bottom of the canyon and notice that there is in fact hundreds and hundreds of feet of exactly this rock unit down here below me, we start to imagine that a very long period of time is represented in the sedimentary strata.
The creationists believe that the layers of sediment were formed rapidly.
People often thought that each little thin bed had to be deposited separately. There's now a lot of evidence that these all form at once, as it were. In the laboratory, you can start with a mixture of grains, and you can let them settle out in water or air, and you'll get them settle out automatically into these alternating bands, these laminae.
At the Engineering Research Center of Colorado State University, Dr. Pierre Julien, together with Guy Berthaud, show that distinct sedimentary layers can be deposited very rapidly.
Experiments at a fairly small scale show that if you have a continuous supply of fine and coarse sands, you can hydraulically separate them to form strata of coarse sands and strata of fine sands.
The experiments show that the formation of stratified layers depends on the size, shape, and density of the particles. By pouring 8 tons of sand mixture together with water through a 60-foot flume, it was found that coarse and fine particles separate out, giving the appearance of laminated strata, with all the features of deltas, dunes, and ripple marks.
We've already seen that the fossils form rapidly, and therefore the rock layers that contain them form rapidly, and you can therefore go from one rock layer to the next rock layer, and you can see that each rock layer didn't take long at all, such as in the Grand Canyon. You can go from the bottom of the Grand Canyon looking at the fossils and the rock layers and study each one and work out how long it may have taken. The sum total of all those rock layers in the Grand Canyon isn't millions and millions of years. It's only a matter of months at the very most. When you see some of these rock layers cover not only just a local area but regional and sometimes continental wide, you can trace some of these rock units right across continents. What would give continental wide sedimentation? A global catastrophic flood. Lots of water in a little bit of time.
Peacocks were among the fossils discovered at La Brea Tar Pit in Los Angeles, together with mastodons and camels. Hundreds of saber-toothed lions were found, along with a human skeleton, their bones all smashed and jumbled together. La Brea Tar Pit is now the site of a museum in the heart of LA. Museum displays claim the animals got stuck in miry tar, cried out and attracted other animals which also got trapped and eventually fossilized. Some experts now question the gradualist explanation. Creation scientists believe that for hundreds of years following a global flood, regional catastrophes had a devastating impact, creating vast fossil graveyards on every continent. In the early 1900s, massive jumbled piles of dinosaur bones were discovered in the hills of Wyoming. Many of the bones were excavated and shipped to museums across the nation. Several different species have been found, but one of the most common was Stegosaurus. What caused the extinction of the dinosaurs? One rock face where more than 2,000 fossil bones are exposed has been preserved at Dinosaur National Monument. Displays claim these dinos died 150 million years ago of ordinary causes. Some experts say it was a massive meteorite impact. And some people believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. Creation scientists claim the mass of jumbled bones suggests the dinosaurs were overwhelmed by a sudden dramatic catastrophe. Although most experts agree that dinosaurs became extinct millions of years ago, some think that fire-breathing dragons may have been dinosaurs. On an expedition to Alaska, the Creation Research Science and Education Foundation found frozen dinosaur bones which were not fossilized, evidence that the dinosaurs were buried very recently.
There's one thing that speaks loudly of these bones. They cry out that they are not 65 million years old. We found a lot of dinosaur bones in this area. In fact, I think we brought back over 200 pounds of bones, and they were not fossilized. These bones were frozen, which just demands another explanation to me other than the millions of years, because I can't believe that dinosaur bones could remain frozen for 65 million years. I mean, you're going to have some thaws sometime in that period that these bones would completely disintegrate.
Discoveries of DNA and blood cells in dinosaur bones also suggest the dinosaurs died recently.
There have indeed been blood cells found in the leg bone of a T-Rex. I've seen the photographs of the blood cells of the Tyrannosaurus, and it does indeed look just very much like the blood cells of some birds. I know some people think, well, how can you have blood cells that are millions of years old, in this case 68 million years old? But if you have a carcass that's out in the sun and it dries out, you still get a lot of tissue that's preserved. If you bury that, you've sealed the bone, and there's no reason why you can't have organic material that's inside that's essentially dehydrated. I mean, it's mostly because of the presence of water that something will rot. I mean, if you take a steak, dry it out, turn it into beef jerky, it doesn't rot.
Now, it turns out to be the head of an apatosaurus on the body of a diplodocus.
Biology professor Dr. Gary Parker, with answers in Genesis, claims blood cells cannot survive millions of years.
Millions of years? Absolutely not. We know far too much chemistry to believe that. The large polymers, like proteins, like collagen, like DNA, are subject to decomposition.
that we can measure in the laboratory. We can get a half-life of how long these things can last. The disappearance rates would suggest maximum ages of only thousands of years, not millions, even under ideal conditions. When you couple that with many other kinds of evidence of man and dinosaur seen together, and the fresh dinosaur bones that don't seem to have been fossilized in climates that would have been warm and moist, not at all dehydrating environments, I think we have really convincing evidence that dinosaurs and dinosaur fossils are young indeed and really belong as a part of human history.
Museum displays, textbooks, and science magazines tell us the fossils speak of millions of years of evolutionary change. But are these dry bones really so ancient? Assumptions of gradual geological processes on which the theory of evolution is based are challenged by evidence that the fossils may be the record of a global flood and devastating subsequent catastrophes. The Bible describes dinosaurs roaming the earth only a few thousand years ago, and the discovery of unfossilized dinosaur bones and vast fossil graveyards suggests the dinosaurs may have left their footprints in very recent years.